When we talk about aircraft that changed aviation forever, the usual legends come to mind: the DC-3 that carried the world through war and peace, the Boeing 707 that ushered in the jet age, or the Concorde that redefined speed and luxury. But tucked quietly behind these giants is a very different kind of hero. It didn't fly faster than sound, it didn't carry hundreds of passengers across oceans, and it wasn't glamorous. Instead, it connected small towns to big cities, carried passengers where no jet could go, and built bridges between people and places. This is the story of the Fokker F-27 Friendship, the turboprop that redefined regional aviation. The early 1950s were a fascinating time in aviation. World War II was over, and the world was rebuilding. Airlines everywhere were still heavily dependent on the Douglas DC-3. Now, the DC-3 was a legend, rugged, reliable, and beloved. But by the 1950s, it was starting to show its age. It was noisy, unpressurized, slow, and passengers increasingly saw it as outdated. What regional airlines needed was a modern replacement, something reliable, comfortable, and able to operate from small, sometimes unprepared airstrips. This is where the Dutch aircraft manufacturer Fokker stepped in. Instead of designing something in isolation, they did something very clever. They went directly to the operators of DC-3s and simply asked, "What do you need in the next aircraft?" The answers were clear. Airlines wanted an aircraft that could use short and rough runways. It needed to be faster than the DC-3, easier to maintain, and above all, comfortable for passengers. The result was the F-27, a high-wing turboprop unlike anything the world had seen in the regional market. That high wing wasn't just for looks. It gave excellent ground clearance, allowing the aircraft to safely operate from gravel or dirt runways without the propellers striking debris. It also made boarding easier, especially at airports without modern infrastructure. Powering the F-27 were Rolls-Royce Dart engines, the same turboprops that had already proven themselves on the Vickers Viscount. These engines were reliable, fuel-efficient, and provided a smooth, quiet ride compared to piston engines. And then came the real game-changer, a pressurized cabin. For the first time, passengers on short regional hops could enjoy the same comfort as those flying on long-haul jets, cruising above the weather instead of bouncing through it. But perhaps the most revolutionary innovation was hidden in the aircraft's skin. Fokker pioneered a technique called Redux bonding, which used adhesives to glue metal sheets together instead of relying entirely on rivets. This made the aircraft lighter, stronger, and more resistant to fatigue. In the 1950s, this was cutting-edge engineering, and it gave the F-27 a durability that would keep it flying for decades. The prototype F-27 took its maiden flight on November 24, 1955. Initially designed for 28 passengers, testing showed some handling issues. Fokker responded quickly, lengthening the fuselage to fix the balance. This not only solved the problem but also increased capacity, a win-win that made the aircraft even more attractive to airlines. By 1958, Aer Lingus introduced the F-27 into service, and the response was immediate. Compared to the DC-3, the F-27 was nearly twice as fast, much quieter, and far more comfortable. Block times, the time it took from gate to gate, were almost cut in half. For regional passengers, this wasn't just an upgrade, it was a revolution. Orders poured in from around the world. Airlines in Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the Americas embraced the aircraft. From rugged outback strips in Australia to snowy fields in Canada, the F-27 proved it could operate almost anywhere. It became the workhorse of regional aviation. The demand was so high that Fokker licensed production to Fairchild in the United States. The American-built Fairchild F-27 came with a few improvements of its own, including a built-in rear air stair that allowed passengers to board without ground equipment. Later, Fairchild stretched the design into the FH-227, while Fokker introduced its own long-body version, the F-27-500. In total, nearly 800 aircraft were built between Fokker and Fairchild, making the F-27 the most successful European turboprop of its time. The family grew into many variants. The standard -100, the more powerful -200, the -300 and the -400 combi versions with cargo doors, the Stretch-500 and even quick-change models. Militaries also found the F-27 incredibly useful, adopting it for troop transport, paratroop drops, aerial survey, maritime patrol, and even medical evacuation. The U.S. Army's Golden Knights parachute team used the C-31A troopship, a military F-27, for years. But what made the Friendship truly remarkable wasn't just its versatility, it was its impact. For many small communities, the F-27 was the first modern airliner they ever saw. It connected villages, islands, and remote towns to major cities, shrinking distances and opening up new opportunities. In the United States, FedEx relied on F-27s as part of their feeder fleet well into the 2000s, moving packages where jets couldn't operate. Of course, like any widely operated aircraft, the F-27 had its share of tragedies. Sempiti Air Flight 304 crashed in Indonesia in 1997 after an engine failure. In 1972, Aero Trasporti Italiani lost an F-27-200 in a storm. And in 2012, an Indonesian Air Force F-27 went down during a training flight, causing casualties both in the air and on the ground. These accidents, while deeply tragic, serve as reminders of the risks of aviation, especially in regions where weather, terrain, and infrastructure made flying inherently dangerous. Yet the story of the F-27 is not defined by tragedy but by endurance. Some of these aircraft flew for over half a century. Even into the late 2010s, a handful of F-27s could still be found in commercial service, an extraordinary testament to their ruggedness. And its legacy didn't stop with the Friendship. In the 1980s, Fokker introduced the Fokker 50, a direct evolution of the F-27. With modern avionics, fuel-efficient Pratt & Whitney engines, and a 30% improvement in economy, it carried the DNA of the Friendship into a new era. The Fokker 50 itself served with airlines all over the world and remains in limited use today. The Fokker F-27 may not have had the fame of the 747 or the glamour of the Concorde, but its contribution to aviation was no less important. It proved that regional air travel could be modern, comfortable, and efficient. It showed that a well-designed turboprop could adapt to countless roles, from passenger flights to military missions, from carrying kings to delivering packages. From the jungles of Papua New Guinea to the frozen fields of Scandinavia, from small-town airports in India to major European hubs, the F-27 truly earned its name. It was a Friendship not just in name, but in spirit, connecting people, bridging distances, and bringing the world just a little closer together. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy of all. The Fokker F may 27th not have broken speed records or dazzled the world with its size. But it did something far more important. It gave everyday people in every corner of the globe a chance to fly comfortably, reliably, and safely. And in doing so, it changed aviation forever.